Our next presenter is Linwood Gill, the Chief Forester of Ruffy's Usal Redwood Forest Company. When we acquired the Usal Forest in 2007, we inherited a traditional forest management company. So the hiring of Linwood in January of 2017 was a very exciting moment for Ruffy. Finding the right forester to lead our in-house forestry team was essential to our success, and we found the right man. Linwood joined Ruffy after 30 years as a private consultant forester for small and non-industrial landowners. And as chief forester, he oversees all aspects of operations in the Usal Forest, including timber harvesting, reforestation, stand improvement, budgeting and finance, and restoration projects. He is the founding member of the widely respected Forest Stewards Guild and strongly supports the Guild's principle that a forester's first duty is to the forest and their future. One of his favorite quotes is that a forester is remembered not for what he takes, but for what he leaves behind. So I'm pleased to introduce Linwood Gill. Linwood, take it away.
Great, thanks, Mark. Really happy to be here and be part of the Redwood Forest Foundation and in this role at the Usal Redwood Forest Company. Preparing for this presentation today, I always kind of look back at different quotes and sayings that kind of really ring true to me and what this organization is about. And just kind of thumbing through one of my favorite books, which is Donald Pease, Natural History of Western Trees. As it implies, it's a description of all the different tree species in the Western United States. He goes into a lot of prose of kind of flowery language describing different trees, and even some trees that a lot of people don't think of very fondly. His language is just great, and I just love reading his descriptions. And reading what he has to say about redwoods. One thing really hit me thinking about this conversation, and he talks a lot about how in the beginning everybody thought the redwoods were inexhaustible. They were these huge trees. There's no way you would cut all these trees down. But his book was written in 1950, and by that time there were Caterpillar tractors. Land that was too steep or inaccessible for earlier logging methods were now available and exploited to extreme levels in some cases. No longer did they, think about how are they going to get them down to the bottom of the hill and, float them down the river. It was more of, well, let's go up there and get them. And they built roads and tractor skid trails, all over the place. And as with water, the path of least resistance is downhill and right along the ravines and the creeks. And that's where they built the roads. That's where they built the skid trails. And the effects were devastating in some places. And he goes on to talk about how important the species was for the local communities in the area because it gave them the jobs to get established. But then he asks, I'm going to kind of paraphrase this a little bit, is this something that we should be proud of or indignant? It's easy to give a quick emotional answer, depending on your economic persuasion or your aesthetic values. But if one person or is appointed the arbiter for, and had the sole responsibility, to do justice to these conflicting interests, then, every viewpoint has to be looked at. And it kind of closes it with, you have to acknowledge that, we have an awakening consciousness that this heritage, meaning the redwoods of all ages, calls for our responsibility. And that's where I think we are at with Ruffy and the Usal Redwood Forest Company. We have been given this responsibility to manage this land that once held the most amazing coniferous forest on the planet. No doubt there are many conflicting interests in how we manage that. And we are accountable, to balance those interests. not only for the benefit of the local community, but, with our realization of climate change, the global community, and managing these forests for that reason also. And we all take that responsibility very seriously here at Usal Redwood Forest Company and the Redwood Forest Foundation. So Kathy mentioned that, sometimes she thinks about this as our laboratory. And I couldn't agree with her more. One of the principles of the Forest Stewards Guild talks about always having to learn from the forest. And that's what we are doing now. We are gaining knowledge on what works on this particular property. And as our forest grows and matures, so does our staff. And I actually envy some of our younger staff members right now, because they have come on to this property at a drastic change in its future. And they will have the opportunity to hopefully build a whole career on this 50,000 acres. And nothing is more important for the land than to have someone that manages it for so long that they get to understand it and get to see how these different interactions happen with, our management activities, and how the forest actually responds to that. So, and speaking of our staff, I have to say, we're going to have a video here in a second, and we're going to see some of the work that has been done. But our forestry staff, particularly Jeff Hauser, who is our forest operations manager, Joaquin Quintana and Travis Munoz, who are our forest technicians, they're the real boots on the ground. Most of this work that we're going to see would not happen without them on the property. And then another staff member, Karen Youngblood, you will see her give a little presentation here in a little bit. And also want to reiterate just briefly that if you have questions about what we're doing or something you see in the presentation, go ahead, jot it down in the question and answers. I will look at those near the end, and if I have time, I will try to answer 2 or 3 of those. So with that, on with our tour. We're going to look at the Usal Beach Timber Harvest Plan, or THP. As we scan around the hillside here, we're starting to get into the area that we logged. You see a few little openings here and there, but most of this was done as a single tree selection. And so from a distance, you don't see a whole lot. We're going to swing around kind of the upper part of the watershed. Soldier Creek is off to the left. Karen's going to talk about that in a minute. And as we swing back around to this side, or I guess it would be the south side of Usal Creek, we're going to see, some of our activity a little closer. We have a group selection. You can see a little bit of that. And then as we scroll down, we kind of blend into the single tree selection. And single tree selection, we're looking at taking out individual trees here and there. Here's the top of a redwood circle, the sprouting coming off the old stumps. This is what it looks like from above. We took out 2 or 3 trees out of there, leaving the better trees to grow for the future. We're going to scan over a little bit to the group selection straight from above. And most of our group selections are smaller, typically like about an acre, acre and a half in size. This one is just about an acre. And even within the group, we like to leave trees that will be future legacy trees or potential seed trees now. And on our groups, we're going up along the side of the group right now. We like to find places that already have what we consider kind of advanced regeneration. Here's a redwood sprout, probably like about 10 years old, 15 years old. So by allowing more light into where we already have some regeneration started, it really kind of jump starts that next age class. And that's what we're really looking for. We're looking for a multi-age forest out there. And a lot of this is, been clear cut in the past, and it is typically all the same age. Here is our, our single tree selection area. And one of the first things we look for is, which trees do we want to leave? Which are the trees that we want to grow you know, excuse me, in our, to our largest diameter classes available to us. And again, here's where's redwood sprouting off of an old growth stump. You can look down on the ground and you can see, I think, two of the smaller trees that we removed. So we're kind of reducing that competition. And redwood, a lot of times it's for, it's for water. Sometimes it's for light if we take out one of the more codominant trees. Now, this is a classic example of the trees we want to grow into the future. Tall, straight, nice live crowns, and very clean boles. Now these trees are starting to get to the size we want, but they're not quite there yet. It's kind of hard to tell how big they are. I'm gonna step away, go stand next to this tree for a second. And as I walk up to the tree, you can see, kind of get a feel for how big those trees are. This one I'm coming up to is roughly about 28, maybe 30 inches in diameter. And ideally, we want to grow trees up to 3-4 feet in diameter, in which case then we may make a call to never harvest that tree, or it's one that we'll harvest at some point in the future. Now in front, you'll see it looks like a big stump. It's actually two trees. Off to the left, there's a center of one tree, and to the right is the other. And those two trees were fused together, and typically we like to remove those trees when they're like that, unless they have special wildlife features. So let's head back up the road and we'll take a look at a couple wildlife trees. Off to the right, you'll see a couple redwoods. In the center is a Douglas fir. Typically, we like to remove the Douglas fir that's competing with the redwoods. But in this case, a little further to the left, here's another redwood tree, has a broken top, has some of those features that a lot of these younger forests lack. And so when we see these, we want to encourage them. We want that tree to get bigger. It probably won't get a whole lot taller, but it has this nice flat lateral limb, nice platform for future nesting habitat. But that Douglas fir off to the right, if we would have cut that tree, it would have just fallen right on top of that lateral limb. So that's something we left so we could benefit the wildlife habitat. All right, I'm going to move up the road again a little bit further. We've got a lot of invasive plants on the property, particularly Scotch broom, pampas grass. Most of that comes in along the edge of the roads. Seed brought in years ago on equipment and vehicles. So we're, masticate some of that back so we have better access into the property. Here's after the work is done. Road is nice and clear, suitable for fire trucks, logging trucks, personal vehicles, safer to come around a turn when you can actually see what's on the other side of the turn. Going to move over a little bit further on the property to some of our timber stand improvement work or pre-commercial thinning. This is about a 25-year-old clear cut from previous owners. We went in, cut back a lot of the competing vegetation, again for water competition, and thinning out some of the other redwoods or Douglas fir around, so better sunlight. You can kind of see from above, you've got a little bit of a better spacing between these crowns. You can almost kind of visualize what happens as those trees get older. And this is actually one of our 2017 timber harvest plans, Mill Creek Eel. You'll see some gaps in here in the middle. Those were areas where it was kind of patchy, a lot of tan oak, and we took the tan oak out to help facilitate our biochar program. Luckily, we had a landing right here. Logs were skidded down, chipped, and then taken over to the biochar facility. This year, we went in, cleared off all of the slash that was left, and then flattened the top of it out a little bit more so it was suitable for CAL FIRE or California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection for their fire prevention protection work, and also air ambulance service. So lot jammed in there really quickly, but that is our a tour of the property. So if you do have any questions after the presentation is over, my email address is simple, Linwood, Linwood, @rffi.org. Feel free to drop me an email, and I'll be glad to talk with you more about the work we're doing on the Usal Redwood Forest Company.